Hello and happy Super Bowl week. Welcome to the Tracy Sandler Show on Bleav. So much to discuss, and I'm excited to welcome back Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee and co-host of the Candlestick Chronicles Podcast on Blue Wire. Chris is awesome, good friend, great colleague, smart guy, lots to discuss. Welcome back to the show, Christopher.
Thank you. Am I the first repeat guest that you've had since you've joined the new network?
No, Steve Weiss was my first repeat guest.
Oh, okay. I feel much less special then.
Well, yeah, you should, but it's not. It's just because, Steve is great and you're great. It's just you got to come back first. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So what are we going to talk about? Jim Harbaugh? Is that the plan here?
We are not
excited I am that he's back.
We can talk about, this could actually just become a full-on Jim Harbaugh podcast. I'm totally fine with that. This could now be called the Jim Harbaugh Show, brought to you by Tracy Sandler. And I'm super into it. But I am excited Jim Harbaugh is back. As you know, I love my coach. Chris went to Ohio State, so there is always a Michigan-Ohio State rivalry going on between us.
And to be clear, I'm very excited that Jim Harbaugh is back in Michigan also.
So for different reasons, I am glad he's back because I think he is just amazing and he's going to lead Michigan to more and more victories over Ohio State. Chris is glad he's back because Jim Harbaugh's only beat Ohio State once and he doesn't think he's going to do it again.
And there's a chance.
Summation?
There's a very good chance that Jim Harbaugh's Michigan tenure, based on everything you read now, that he sort of flirted with the Vikings and thought he was going to get the job and didn't, that Michigan's program is going to be in a very awkward place going forward. So as someone who covered the 49ers when Jim Harbaugh was on his way out there, I'm excited as an Ohio State fan to see what it looks like as this thing moves forward with him.
And I, as a Michigan fan, don't really care who he flirted with. That's all I care about. And I'm very, very happy about that. So I'm going to transition this actually into one of the things we're going to talk about. Chris and I both cover the 49ers, and we were going to talk about some offseason needs before diving a little bit into Super Bowl. And we still are, but all of a sudden those offseason needs are big time on the coaching staff. Maybe, I don't know that I said that in the most eloquent of ways, but over the last several days, it's been confirmed that John Embry is not coming back as the tight ends coach, but they hired Anthony Lynn, which I think is a fantastic hire for San Francisco. And we can talk more about that. Most recently, Mike McDaniel, the offensive coordinator, leaving to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, where press conferences in Miami are about to get way more interesting and entertaining. And also they need a new special teams coach. Richard Hightower has been hired by the Chicago Bears. 49ers special teams, except for that one game, which was an important game, not anything to write home about unless you were, I don't know that anybody does that anymore, but if you were writing home to talk about how bad they were, then you might write home about them. So that becomes another interesting thing for this team. Let's talk a little bit about Mike McDaniel. Up until this year, the 49ers did not actually have an offensive coordinator. So it'll be interesting to see if they end up replacing that position, at least in title.
Yeah, so I think what's going to end up happening is Anthony Lynn is going to take over a lot of Mike McDaniel's responsibilities when it comes to creating game plans and helping Kyle Shanahan call plays during games, right? Mike McDaniel, what's interesting about it, and you see this more and more as the NFL goes on and starts hiring guys off these coaching trees, they're bringing in head coaches that don't have play calling experience. You saw it with Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. You've seen it in other places, and now these guys are going to be calling plays for the first time. And Mike McDaniel never had that responsibility under Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan was, in large part, the offensive coordinator, right? But it wasn't until this last season that Mike McDaniel got promoted to offensive coordinator, but he still wasn't calling plays. And so, we have an idea of what the offense is going to look like, right? Like it's probably going to be outside zone, a lot of play action, a lot of quarterback-friendly things, particularly if they keep Tua Tagovailoa in Miami. But it's going to be fascinating to see how McDaniel handles the operation as the play caller. And, he was somebody who was in the booth, like since he came to the 49ers, he was observing games from the booth and watching upstairs and helping Kyle Shanahan diagnose mismatches and create, game plans on the fly and adjustments and all of that stuff. What's that going to be like from the sideline now that he's going to be on the sideline with a different vantage point, obviously with different responsibilities? Is he going to be the play caller? I would assume so. Who's he going to surround himself with? Is he going to take more 49ers coaches from the staff with him to Miami in a similar way Robert Saleh did when he took the New York Jets job last offseason? So these are all going to be interesting subplots, and that we'll learn about more as these next few weeks unfold. But it's going to be fascinating because now that Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay tree just continues to grow, right? And you have Nathaniel Hackett now in Denver, offensive coordinator with Green Bay, who is from the Matt LaFleur tree, who is obviously from the Shanahan and McVay tree, and just so many more. It seems like as time keeps going on, and it makes sense because Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay were the last two coaches alive in the NFC. So it'll be interesting to see how the 49ers react and if they can continue to develop a strong coaching staff, because you look at it too, and we can talk about this, but nobody in the NFL has benefited more from the compensatory draft pick rules for hiring minority candidates than the 49ers have. They instituted those rules 2 years ago. And the 49ers already got draft compensation for Martin Mayhew taking a GM job with Washington. They had Robert Saleh last year, and now they have Mike McDaniel this year. They might have D'Amico Ryans next year. And you're looking at a scenario where, that's a lot of extra third round picks, right? They're already at what, 5 extra third round picks as a result of these minority hires being made from their organization. So that certainly helps them. And it'll be interesting to see how the NFL as a whole reacts going forward.
So it will be interesting to see how it goes in Miami. Obviously, Robert Saleh had a tough first year in New York, but I think that was to be expected because he took over the Jets. So it could be a tough few years. But going back to the 49ers, there are obviously positions they are now going to have to fill on the coaching staff, as we discussed. Be interesting to see how that plays out. But let's talk player personnel. There are a lot of guys who are free agents, a lot of guys who last year were in on one-year deals after COVID and the salary cap that happened to a number of players. What do you see as the biggest offseason needs for San Francisco?
Well, there are quite a few of them, I would think, right? Because it depends on how they address their own free agents, right? Because if they don't bring back Laken Tomlinson, who's probably their best free agent, potentially outgoing, then obviously left guard becomes a significant need. And then you don't know what's going to happen with Alex Mack, who said last week that he's sort of in, taking it 1 year at a time mode, given that he's 36 and unsure if he's going to come back and play. And he had a nice season and played in the Pro Bowl over the weekend, obviously, along with Laken Tomlinson. So those two guys, I think if you lose one or both of those guys, the interior of the offensive line becomes a significant concern. But in terms of, their overall needs and how you evaluate where the roster is, you have DJ Jones, a nose tackle, a talented player who certainly was valuable for the 49ers and has dealt with ankle issues throughout his time, but he's a free agent. And you wonder, okay, do they decide to let him go and not pay him the premium that he might get on the open market, which could potentially allow Javon Kinlaw to play nose tackle, given that you had Eric Armstead play 3 technique, which had been Javon Kinlaw's position, and Armstead played it at a pretty high level. And you really saw the defensive line take off after Armstead made that position switch when Javon Kinlaw went down on injured reserve when he had knee surgery early in the season. So that's going to be an interesting discussion to have. I would say cornerback is continuously going to be an area of concern for the 49ers. And,
it's like the bane of the 49ers existence. Every year, forever. 49, it is. I don't know what Achilles heel. I don't even know if it's their Achilles heel. It's just like the bane of their existence.
Yeah. It was interesting, right? Because we had talked about cornerback being such a prominent position of need for the 49ers throughout the season. Even going into the season, we said, you probably can't rely on Jason Verrett to be your number one corner. And then what happens week 1, Jason Verrett tears his ACL, he's done for the year. So your depth issues are already under a microscope, right? And then you go through the season, and I think the corners started punching above their weight a little bit, right? Like Emmanuel Mosley played well, but then you had Ambry Thomas come in and play pretty well. You had Dante Johnson, come in and play pretty well. And you say, okay, well, if you look at the numbers, the 49ers defense is holding up pretty well and ended up finishing top 5 overall in yardage, I believe. And A lot of that had to do with the pass rush, of course, but you could say the 49ers cornerback situation isn't bad. And then you go through, the playoffs where they played pretty well against Dallas and a really good group of receivers, right? You go to Green Bay and you limit Aaron Rodgers and that offense to just one touchdown. And then you go to the Rams in the NFC Championship game, and then all of a sudden Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. are just really difficult for the 49ers to cover. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, all right, maybe they do that cornerback issue is real, right? It was that, like, that's ultimately where the rubber meets the road with the cornerback conversation, because they are going to need to stop those guys, right? If they're going to get back to the Super Bowl at some point coming up here. So obviously Josh Norman wasn't the answer. He ended up losing his job. They would hope Ambry Thomas can continue to get better. Emmanuel Mosley is a fine player, but I don't know that he's somebody that prevents you from making a significant investment in an upgrade at cornerback if you can possibly do that. So yeah, you look at cornerback, you look at interior of the offensive line. But overall, I mean, you could look at safety as well, with Jaquiski Tartt being a free agent and Jimmy Ward having just 1 year left on his contract. But overall, the Niners roster is in a pretty good place. One other, I guess, position that you could look at is running back too, because you do have Elijah Mitchell, who had a very good rookie season, but he also missed some time. And then you have Raheem Mostert as a free agent and Jeff Wilson Jr. as a free agent. So do you bring one of those guys back? Do you let both of them walk? Do you bring in more running backs this offseason, which assuredly the 49ers will do, but is it going to be a draft pick? Is it going to be, undrafted rookies? Is it going to be a free agent from outside the organization? And then you do have Trey Sermon too, who more or less redshirted his entire rookie season this year. But overall though, I would say the Niners roster is in a pretty good place.
So let's talk about the three areas that you did bring up, and I agree with all three of them. That interior of the offensive line is going to be important to watch, especially with Trey Lance coming in and being a starter for the first time, coming off a rookie season where he did get some playing time, but not a ton. And so I think you do want to have a very strong offensive line. So I'm sure from the 49ers perspective, they would hope that Alex Mack and Laken Tomlinson will be back. But if not, I think that is an area of importance. I want to bring up Javon Kinlaw, because that's, to me, a very interesting one if you're the 49ers, because you've put a lot of time and resources into Javon Kinlaw, who has not been available to show you whether or not that is something you want to continue. You have DJ Jones, who has played an extremely high level, but is going to demand a fair amount of money. If you're San Francisco, I think that is a really a tough one right there. And that's one where I'm glad I'm not in charge, because I don't know, exactly what you do. I would think DJ Jones would be a huge loss, especially if Javon Kinlaw doesn't pan out. But maybe the hope is, well, now he's had this surgery that apparently was supposed to fix everything, and he'll be able to play at the level they were hoping. But you don't know that for sure.
Yeah, the Kinlaw thing's interesting because he had knee issues going back to college, right? Mm-hmm. And he missed time. He was on and off the practice field throughout training camp, and he would say things on social media like, "I'm not injured." And then it was very clear that the knee was a significant issue. And then ultimately he has to go on the shelf to have ACL reconstruction surgery, which cost him his entire season. So if the knee is healthy, I guess, going forward, or at least as healthy as it can be, then Javon Kinlaw I should factor into the equation pretty significantly, I would think. And I think it might be ultimately that it's better for him to focus on nose tackle rather than being a three technique, right? Because with Eric Armstead there as a pass rusher on the inside and that DeForest Buckner role that he occupied so well before he was traded to Indianapolis, the 49ers defensive line took a big jump. And you saw Eric Armstead play really well. In week 18 against the Rams, he had 2 sacks. He had 2 sacks in Green Bay, a lot of third down plays. And it seemed like him and Nick Bosa and the other guys really started to come together and form a one of the best, if not the best, pass rushing defensive fronts left in the playoffs when the 49ers were still playing. Mm-hmm. If you have Javon Kinlaw at nose tackle, you don't have to move Eric Armstead away from that role, in essence, right? Mm-hmm. So it is easier to move Javon Kinlaw to nose tackle, where he did start to play a little bit more before getting hurt. And then maybe that's a comfortable situation, particularly if you do lose DJ Jones, right? Because the 49ers are up against it this year when it comes to cap money. If you look at, I think as we're recording this, according to overthecap.com, the 49ers are in the red. They're like $4 or $5 million in the red when it comes to cap dollars. And that's before trying to re-sign Laken Tomlinson and all of their other free agents. But obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo's money's still on the books, right? So you have, between Jimmy Garoppolo and potentially Dee Ford, who the 49ers could release or trade, or if he retires, potentially give him a post-June 1 designation, which would clear about $7 million off the books. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at somewhere between 30 to 32 million in cap space if you're able to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, if and when you trade Jimmy Garoppolo, and potentially move on from Dee Ford. So that will give the 49ers much more flexibility. And then you look at, okay, do they start restructuring guys? Do they restructure Eric Armstead and convert some of his base salary into signing bonus? He's due to cost $20 million on the cap this year. So if Armstead's a good player, don't get me wrong. Is he a $20 million player? I think that's certainly debatable. Mm-hmm. But maybe you cut his cap number a little bit by making some of those conversions. And you can do that with Trent Williams. You could do that with George Kittle. You can do that with Fred Warner, potentially. All your big contracts, I think there are built-in mechanisms to where you can restructure them to create cap space. So ultimately, there could be a scenario where, before the league year starts and the 49ers have to spend, they could have somewhere between 35 and 40 million in cap space, I would guess, just as a pure estimate. But that's, again, before signing any free agents, before signing Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa to their new contracts, which are probably going to come this offseason at some point. So there's going to be flexibility, but in terms of Javon Kinlaw, I think I don't see the 49ers moving off of him anytime soon because they have invested so much in him and he's still a talented player. It's just more about availability, and we saw it, like the 49ers have stuck with guys who have had injury histories. In some situations it's panned out and some it hasn't. Armstead's a classic example, right? Because his first few seasons, he missed about half of his games. And he had sort of that injury prone label attached to him. And he's been one of the 49ers most durable players the last few years, right? Same with Jimmy Ward. He was, missed a ton of time his first few seasons and has been pretty durable over the last few. So, I think the 49ers are hoping that's sort of the trajectory Javon Kinlaw can ride for the time being. And I think, his status probably impacts their decision on DJ Jones in a pretty substantial way because paying a nose tackle, probably a little bit of a luxury, and I'm not sure the 49ers can afford it given where they are cap-wise and given the other needs that they have. So I think 2022 is going to be a very big year for Javon Kinlaw and his overall standing in the league, particularly if the 49ers are deciding to move on from DJ Jones.
And then when we're going to corner, K'Waun Williams is a free agent, correct?
Yes.
So I wouldn't be surprised if in the cornerback conversation, they feel Ambry Thomas is going to improve. I mean, Kyle Shanahan spoke more than once about how much of a surprise Ambry Thomas was to him. Not to me, of course, because he went to Michigan, so I knew it was there. But how much of a surprise Ambry Thomas was to him. And so in theory, he will just continue to get better. Emmanuel Moseley is a fine player. I don't think it, like you said, it would prevent them from making an investment or an upgrade at corner. But I wouldn't be surprised if they choose to really make an investment, at the nickel position. I wouldn't be surprised if K'Waun Williams is not back. He has played very well over the years. He had a fine season, but I could see them potentially moving on. But they have to make an investment somewhere in that position. And I don't know if they make the investment and it's someone who becomes a number one and then the other two are fighting for the other number one spot. But they got to make an investment somewhere because it was very clear in that Rams game. And the Rams are in their division. So even though they've owned them minus that one NFC Championship game, that is a place where they are gonna have to, upgrade.
Yeah, K'Waun Williams turns 31 before next season starts. And he has been a good player, but durability has been kind of an issue. And I don't know if the 49ers saw enough from fifth-round pick Deommodore Lenoir this year to be comfortable in just saying, all right, Lenoir is going to be our starter at nickel, and we'll move forward from that. I think Lenoir has potential, but he sort of played his way off the field as the season went along, and he was one of the reasons why There was concern about the 49ers cornerback situation early on because he was a rookie and he was, borderline unplayable. And it happened in the Green Bay game early in the season when, Devontae Adams had those 2 catches that ultimately led to the game-winning field goal in week 3. There was a Seattle game where Lenore was in there and got picked on by Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf. He allowed a long 3rd down conversion, I remember, to Metcalf in that game. He allowed a touchdown in coverage. I think he had a pass interference in the end zone at one point. That was a pretty ugly play. And so, for the 49ers to feel comfortable with Lenore in the slot, he's going to need to get a lot better. Which points to them potentially being active in free agency because, again, K'Wan Williams going to be 31. Is he somebody you want to pay market rate? I don't necessarily know that it's sort of in the same discussion as DJ Jones. Like, yeah, sure, you'd love to retain K'Wan Williams, but are you going to match more aggressive offers that he's likely going to get on the open market to a team that might need an experienced nickel a little bit more than the 49ers? I don't know that they do that. So then you start looking at, okay, do they go free agency? Do they use an early draft pick at the nickel spot? And it's super important because obviously Cooper Kupp was a serious problem for them, right? So yeah. K'Wan Williams really struggled with Cooper Kupp, and everybody struggles with Cooper Kupp. I don't know that one game is going to be the defining factor in whether or not the 49ers bring him back, but given how they are strapped from a cap standpoint, I can't imagine that they're going to field the same type of offer that he could get on the open market, which is probably going to be similar to what happens with DJ Jones.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I would not be surprised if either of them were not back. And though everybody struggles with Cooper Kupp, you want to put yourself in a position to be able to defend him. And if the Rams end up keeping Odell Beckham Jr. and Cooper Kupp, then I think honestly that does become an issue for the 49ers and one that will affect what they do. Because again, they are in their division. And DK Metcalf is in their division. And DeAndre Hopkins is in their division.
It's a very loaded division for receivers.
It's a very loaded division for receivers. So once again, it's another offseason of talking about how the 49ers need to upgrade at the cornerback position. I feel like this will be something we will discuss till the end of time every year.
Absolutely. How have we not talked about the quarterback situation yet?
Well, because the 49ers need an experienced QB2. I feel like it's because I've talked about the quarterback situation on this podcast much. But I think we have a pretty general idea of what's going to happen with the quarterback situation. The big question, of course, is where's Jimmy Garoppolo going to go and what are they going to be able to get for him? And then what are they going to do in the QB2 position? But I think, this is not groundbreaking analysis. It's been discussed. But with the addition of Anthony Lynn, Tyrod Taylor all of a sudden becomes a very good prospect in that position because you do want Trey Lance to have someone behind him who is a veteran. You want someone in that position that should Trey Lance get injured can come in. I mean, we've seen Trey Lance didn't play that much. Trey Lance did get hurt a couple of times.
He got hurt twice.
So I think you do want someone in that position that could step in if necessary. So I think Tyrod Taylor does become a possibility there, but I guess we'll see how that all plays out. But if you have something else you would like to say in the quarterback position, please don't let me stop you.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I think there are a lot of potential options, and I just pulled up the list of free agent quarterbacks. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Andy Dalton, Tyrod Taylor, Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater. One name that really stands out to me, which I think would make a lot of sense, in addition to Tyrod Taylor, is Marcus Mariota. Because he's a free agent. He made $3.5 million last year with the Raiders. And look, you have to approach a backup quarterback. And if you're a team like the 49ers whose window is open, their championship quote unquote window is open. You have to approach the backup quarterback situation. Like, can I trust this person in a big spot if I need to, right? Like if Trey Lance is hurt, and we're in a must-win game for, division seeding or playoff seeding or even in the playoffs. Like, do you want just the cheapest option or do you want somebody that you trust in a spot like that? So, to me, Taylor makes sense from that perspective. Mariota makes sense from that perspective. So I do think I'm with you in that. I think it's important they make an actual investment and maybe overpay for one of these guys because not only do you need a veteran in the room, but given that we've seen Trey Lance be injured twice, even though he only played in, had 2 starts, with the 49ers as a rookie. And the way that you presume that Kyle Shanahan's going to use him in the running game, you want an experienced backup and somebody that you could potentially win a game or two if you need to in a big spot. So Taylor, Mariota, those guys make a lot of sense. Where do you think Jimmy's going to go?
If I had to pick right now, you said like you just have to pick right this second. Where is he going? I would say Pittsburgh.
I think Pittsburgh too.
I think there are other options that if we were to have a bigger conversation about it, that of places he could go. But I would say right now, Pittsburgh just makes a lot of sense on kind of all levels for everybody involved.
And I wonder if, does Miami make sense now with Mike McDaniel there?
Potentially.
Are they going to move on from Tua? That's always a big question. New Orleans, like what's going to happen with their coaching situation? Mm-hmm. Is that going to be an enticing spot for Jimmy? I mean, the thing is that Garoppolo and his camp are going to have say in terms of how this thing ends up, right? Because, Mike Tomlin's, one of his favorite saying is you want volunteers, not hostages. Mm-hmm. Well, if Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't want to go somewhere, then more than likely he's not going to go to that place, right?
Right.
So if he wants to go to Pittsburgh, which if you're Jimmy Garoppolo and you want to win games, that's the place where you want to go this offseason because of the infrastructure there, because of the defense, because the weapons already in place. I don't know stylistically from like a scheme standpoint how well Garoppolo fits, but I'm sure they could make adjustments and figure that out. But if I'm Jimmy, I'm trying to go to Pittsburgh. Yeah. And then I'm probably trying to go to Miami next because of the familiarity with McDaniel. Maybe Denver with, Nathaniel Hackett, maybe running a similar system to the LaFleur, the Shanahan, the McVay offense. But yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be Pittsburgh because it seems like Pittsburgh giving up a third or a conditional second or a package of picks, including those things, like that's something a good franchise would do in an offseason where there might not be, great draft prospects or other free agents that make a whole lot of sense. And like, are they going to trade like 3 firsts for Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers? Like, I don't really see that as something Pittsburgh would do. Not at this point in those guys' careers, but right. So that to me, I think Pittsburgh is still the team that stands out.
What will be interesting though is if Rich Scangarello goes to Miami, then that becomes something very. If he ends up going as the quarterback's coach, then I think Miami does become a much more attractive place for Jimmy. Obviously Mike McDaniel, but I don't know. So that becomes like a whole other conversation. So
I don't know if Miami needs Rich Scangarello to be an attractive place for Jimmy Garoppolo.
No, I know, but don't you think if his quarterback coach and offensive coordinator go, that's like, and also it's Miami.
Miami. Like I'm envisioning Jimmy on South Beach just living a very, very healthy life for Jimmy Garoppolo.
And a very different life than he might be living in Pittsburgh.
Yes, South Beach Jimmy would be a funny thing.
Okay, now that we've had this conversation, I have it like in my head. I have it like the Dolphins announcement, like in full on like Don Johnson blazer, t-shirt, sunglasses. Welcome to Miami, Jimmy Garoppolo.
It would be like 3 buttons deep instead of the usual 2 with Jimmy at the introductory press conference. Yes. I think maybe.
Well, it's Miami, like right, exactly. gold sunglasses. I am first of all, I am right. We get off the podcast. I am contacting the Dolphins social team, so they are ready. and I think I'm now all in on Jimmy Garoppolo in Miami, purely from like a content announcement perspective. Beyond that, I still think Pittsburgh. But
yeah, in terms of Jimmy living his best life off the field, I think Miami would suit him just fine. But Pittsburgh makes the most football sense in terms of winning games.
But I want him to live his best life. I like Jimmy. So yeah. I want that journey for him. Miami or bust. Let's go. Let's go. This is fun. Well, before I let you go, there is a very big game happening on Sunday. We talked about the Los Angeles Rams. I don't know if you know this, Chris. They'll be playing the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl this week.
Yeah, they will. So are you asking for my pick, my thoughts on the game?
I'm going to ask you for your pick, your thoughts on the game, to send us into wrapping up.
So one thing that's always interesting about the Super Bowl is the underdogs always have a better chance than we always think going in, right? And you can go back. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but like, the underdogs do very well, both straight up and against the spread in the Super Bowl. And the Rams are pretty prohibitive favorites. So you think like, well, okay, Cincinnati probably has a better shot than we're all expecting. There's the idea that, hey, we're the underdogs. Everybody thinks the Rams are going to walk over us, and maybe they have a little bit more of an emotional verve to them going into the game. I think the Rams are very clearly the better team on paper.
Yes.
I don't think playing in LA ultimately is going to matter all that much in terms of home field or whatever. I think the Rams pose a very significant problem for the Bengals offensive line that we've seen struggle. But the Bengals have the playmakers on offense, whether it's Jamar Chase or T. Higgins or Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow. Obviously, like they have the offensive playmakers to maybe overcome their inability to handle the pass rush. And Zach Taylor, who was another guy who I didn't mention earlier, but another guy off the McVay coaching tree.
This is me pulling coaches off trees, by the way.
Those guys are good at devising game plans that get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly. Mm-hmm. So having the extra week of the Super Bowl, you can get a little bit more dynamic in terms of the way you game plan. And I wonder if the Bengals are just going to be getting the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands super quick to negate some of the pass rush issues that they have. So I do think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. I have a hard time picking against the Rams, just given how talented they are. And given that I think Sean McVay, even though he was, I think it's fair to say he was horrendous in terms of game management in the NFC Championship game. But from a schematic standpoint, I thought McVay offensively did a great job, right? Like getting Cooper Kupp open. And when the 49ers would bracket Cooper Kupp, it created space for Odell Beckham Jr., and that's ultimately like the idealized version of that offense, right? Is like if the focus is on Cooper Kupp, if you can have an outlet in OBJ, like you're going to be cooking with gas. So that's going to be really tough for the Bengals to stop, obviously. But nobody gave the Bengals a chance against the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. I don't think many people are going to give them a chance this week. I know you picked the Bengals.
I did.
And I don't disagree with the pick
in a second.
But ultimately I have a hard time picking against the Rams because I think the Rams are better. I think Sean McVay is a better coach. I think they potentially could dominate the trenches when the Rams are on defense. I know I made the case for the Bengals being able to get the ball out quickly. Joe Burrow's still it's his second season, right? So winning the Super Bowl in his second season, it's almost hard to envision that happening. I think, is Ben Roethlisberger the only quarterback that's won a Super Bowl in his second season?
When did Tom Brady win Tom Brady won his first Super Bowl in his second season?
It was his second season? Okay. So Joe Burrow's Tom Brady then? Is that what we're saying?
That's 100% what we're saying here. I don't know how it took you that long to get there.
So I will pick the Rams, gun to my head, because I trust them a little bit more because I think the Bengals are maybe a year early here when it comes to being a true contender, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals won, because even though I do trust the Rams more, I don't have complete trust of the Rams because I don't, Matt Stafford still almost threw the game away in the NFC title game with that interceptable pass to Jaquiski Tartt. So there's still some of that with Stafford. There's still some things with McVay that you don't fully trust, but I do trust the Rams a little bit more than the Bengals.
Well, I picked the Bengals, and this was my reasoning. Your analysis, I don't disagree with any of it, and it makes a lot of sense. My analysis was as follows, I believe, verbatim, when Bleav asked us to pick. The Rams are the better team. Conventional wisdom says the Rams will win, but I have two words for you, and those words are Joe Burrow. And I'm all in on the Bengals, baby. Let's go. Orange forever, or orange this week. So that is my super expert analysis pick, the new Joe Cool. And
are you going to be able to leave your Los Angeles home after making this pick so vehemently on the record?
I think so. I'm going to be
Rams fans going to be camped out in front of your house?
This city doesn't care enough about the Rams just yet. This is still a Lakers and Dodgers town. Fair enough. If they don't win on Sunday, they're still not going to care about the Rams. So that is going to be the big thing. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. As always, if you guys like what you heard, and I know you did, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Thank you for listening to the Tracy Sandler Show on Bleav, presented by Bet Online. And I will talk to everyone later this week. Bye, y'all.